Thank you, Gian Maria, and thank you, Luke, for organizing this wonderful conference, the workshop. And I've learned a lot, and it was really enjoyable. I mean, I had many new experiences. Like like, and there are certain really good things. For example, you can chop your onions in your kitchen as you listen to a talk by talk by Marco or somebody. It's really interesting. So I'm going to continue what Luke talked about. I'll try to basically most of the stuff that I'm going to talk about is already there in Luke's talk. So it's kind of a recapitulation at a slightly different level. I'll try to put it in some and give some perspective on it. Okay, all right. So the first thing that, so this is the definition of the weighted LP spaces and Bergman spaces, just, to make sure that we are talking about the same thing. So for P greater than 0 and infinity, I can define the LP space. And as everybody knows, that's a Banach space for P from 1 to infinity. And the Bergman space in our sense is just the holomorphic functions in there. And provided this weight lambda is good enough, this is also a closed subspace and therefore a Banach space in its own right. So one important thing, a historical point, is Bergman himself most likely was only interested in the L2 situation, and which is kind of natural because L2 is the natural metric of nature, right? Like the Pythagorean theorem and the quadratic Lagrangian in classical mechanics and Hilbert spaces. So LP spaces are kind of mathematical rather than physical, So therefore, things tend to go wrong there. So the one of the important, I'm sorry, this is not what you use. Okay, yeah, this is the correct button. Okay, so as Luke made it completely clear, our goal is to try to understand the following problem. Okay, is there some kind of projection operator from these LP Bergman spaces to from the LP spaces to the corresponding Bergman spaces. For t equal to 2, as there's a natural solution to this problem, natural canonical solution to this problem in the form of the Bergman projection. And what is really important here is that this thing depends only on the complex structure. I mean, again, I think Gian Maria and other people remarked, because this whole Bergman theory in L2 situation deals with the square integrable sections of the canonical bundle. Okay, so which is basically some biholomorphic invariant. Okay. As soon as we go from P equal to 2 to P equal to P, we are in the realm where these things are not natural, in the sense they're not determined by, they're not unnatural, but they're determined by considerations other than the complex structure. Okay? So therefore, how this thing sits inside space and so on. So this is illustrated by the Hartoug's triangle. So if you look at the Hartoug's triangle itself, it is D cross D star. Okay, and and from the point of view of L2 Bergman theory, the Bergman kernel is exactly the same as that of the bi-disk, and the by a Schur's test argument, the Bergman projection is bounded all through from 1 to infinity. However, as soon as you put it in space, in a complex space in a different way, you have a different phenomenon, and that is what the motivation for this thing is. That so you have these blow-ups at p equal to 4, and if you look at the duality at p equal to 4. So as Luke has already pointed out, that these kind of pathological phenomena occur, and the question naturally arises whether one could construct some kind of projection operator from LP of omega to AP of omega. And if such an operator exists, it has many important applications. And most importantly, I think a concrete determination of the dual of the space AP omega in the form of a space of functions. Okay? And this is well known in the case of strongly pseudo-convex domains and stuff. The dual of AP omega is precisely AQ omega by the standard L2 kind of pairing. Now, the way this problem has been studied mostly is by looking at the usual Bergman projection given by the integral against the reproducing kernel, the Bergman kernel, and trying to see if this then defines a bounded operator in LP. Okay, and this is this well-known theory, but as again Luke pointed out, the operator so defined may not be defined for some P. It need not be surjective for certain values of p less than 2. So in which case we have gotten some kind of operator, but certainly not a projection operator. And for sufficient, so some values of p, this operator can be unbounded in a rather spectacular way that it is not closable, so therefore basically there is no nice analytic structure to this object. So therefore this is, we want to look for better solutions to this problem. Again, there is no unique solution to this. Depending on what feature of the Bergman projection you want to emulate, you will get different kinds of things. So one naive approach to this is to look at the geometric definition of the Bergman projection as an orthogonal projection, in the sense that the Bergman projection of a function, of an L2 function, is nothing but the function, holomorphic function in L2, which is in the subspace L2, which is closest to it. So I can't draw a picture because of the technology, but you can draw the mental picture. So there is this plane sitting inside in three-dimensional space, and you want to look at this. Now, as it happens, this thing does have an analog in LP spaces. This is because the LP spaces are what are known as uniformly convex. So there are these analogs of the parallelogram law, partial analogs of the parallelogram law called the Jackson and Hanner inequalities, which say basically that the same argument that shows that in these Hilbert spaces, you can project a point to a compact convex set that works exactly the same way in NP spaces with the change inequality. You can't use the parallelogram inequality anymore. So therefore, we get what is known as the metric projection. So the metric projection exists, and in some sense, it is a geometric replacement for the Bergman projection. But the bad news is that this is almost impossible to understand. First of all, this is nonlinear. This is nonlinear, and it is very difficult to calculate. The only case in which I know how to calculate it is in the unit disk and for radial functions on the unit disk, and it's quite easy. And from that, you also see it is nonlinear. And what happens? How like other properties of this? It's a fascinating problem, but we must consign it to some future things for which the time has not yet come. I don't know how to deal with this. Okay, all right. And
so,
now,
may I ask Debraj?
Yes.
Do you have an A2? Why are you projecting on A2 and not on AP?
I am projecting on AP, but I'm making a typo. I was not careful. I'm projecting on AP. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you see, I need to get better at these Zoom talks. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So now the other possibility is to look at the sub-Bergman projection. The sub-Bergman projection is obtained by throwing out monomials which are not in that AP space. So it can be defined only for p greater than or equal to 2, and Luke just talked about it. So you just take those AP monomials or more invariantly, if you take a domain omega in Cn, you look at the closure of the AP space in A2 space. Okay. In general, AP need not be dense in A2, so you get a certain subspace, and you project orthogonally onto it, and then you try to extend this projection into the LP space. Okay, so I'm going to de-emphasize this a little bit because I want to spend most of the time describing the new thing. So this was discussed by myself, Jeff, and Luke, who showed that this thing works at least on Hartogs triangle, and we'll see later it also works on monomial polyhedra. There is 2 days ago, a paper appeared in arXiv where Boyoung Chen considered a kernel constructed from the variational characterization of the Bergman kernel. Okay, so I don't want to go into this because it's something that is new, and I have no idea at this time how it acts on LP spaces. But this is probably another possibility that is there. But now I want to come to the hero of today's talk, which is a construction of projection operators onto subspaces of Bergman spaces, of Banach spaces, okay, using a basis of that subspace. So what we are going to do is we are going to, instead of constructing the projection geometrically, we will first define a kernel and try to show that this kernel extends to an operator defines an operator on LP. And the motivation is basically the formula representing the Bergman kernel in terms of an orthonormal basis. Okay, and as everybody knows that this formula it is independent of the orthonormal basis, and by very simple estimates one shows that this converges uniformly on compact subsets of omega cross omega. And the idea is to generalize this formula to associate kernel with a subspace of Banach space along with a distinguished basis of that subspace. Let's see how that is done. So the analog of orthogonal or orthonormal basis in Hilbert spaces in Banach spaces is called Schauder basis. It's defined in the obvious way. So a Schauder basis is a sequence of vectors in a Banach space such that every vector can be represented as an infinite linear combination, or more precisely a series with complex coefficients, summation c, j, e, j over here, which converges to x in the norm. Okay. So of course, an orthonormal basis of or orthogonal basis of a Hilbert space is an example of a Schauder basis, and there are others. And another important thing and the important distinction I want to make right away is that unlike in the case of Hilbert spaces, the ordering is very important here. So in the case of Hilbert spaces, orthonormal bases can be permuted among themselves and it will still be orthonormal because of the fact that the series converges if and only, an orthogonal series converges if and only if the sum of the squares of the coefficients is finite. Okay? There is no such, I mean, you can do something Hausdorff-Young kind of thing, but on the other hand, there is no such thing here. So the ordering of the Schauder basis is important, and this is going to cause us some trouble. Okay, and then a couple of general facts about this. So if you look at the mapping that sends an element to the coefficients of the expansion in the Schauder basis, is easily shown to be a continuous mapping, so and therefore a linear functional. It's variously known as the coefficient functionals, biorthogonal functional, or coordinate functional. And the other thing is that unlike a Hilbert space, a Banach space, unlike a Hilbert space having an orthonormal basis, there is no reason for a Banach space to have a Schauder basis a priori. In fact, there's a very simple abstraction. You can easily see that if a Banach space has a Schauder basis, it has to be separable. Okay, because it's basically the same as a sequence space. Okay, however, so therefore things like L infinity are ruled out to begin with, but even there are kind of very sophisticated examples in which there are Banach spaces, separable Banach spaces without Schauder basis. We will be interested in much milder and nicer things. The other thing, very elementary thing from functional analysis that we need is the notion of strict convexity, by which I mean that if you look at the unit sphere in this Banach space, then if I take 2 points on this unit sphere, then the midpoint of the, so here a picture would have been useful, but you can draw it in your head. So you take 2 points on the unit sphere of this Banach space and look at the midpoint. This midpoint is strictly inside the unit ball. Okay, and so this is called strictly convex. Obviously, from you can see easily that visually that this L2, the spaces, inner product spaces are strictly convex, and it can be verified by the Cauchy-Schwarz inequality. And one can also verify quite easily using the condition for equality in the Minkowski triangle inequality, that LP spaces for P between 1 to infinity are also strictly convex. Okay, and we'll see what the significance of this are. The significance of this, and I already have it on this slide, is that if we observe that in the case of Hilbert spaces, if we have a linear functional on a subspace that extends to the whole space, there's always a Hahn-Banach extension, but the Hahn-Banach extension in Hilbert spaces is unique, and this is a property also shared by spaces, by Banach spaces whose duals are strictly convex. This is a very simple calculation that I leave it to you. So therefore, this is the category of spaces in which there are unique Hahn-Banach extensions. Now I think I can explain how one can try to emulate the construction of an orthogonal projection in Banach spaces by using a Schauder basis of a subspace. So the setting is that I take a Banach space strategically called L, whose dual is strictly convex, and we start with a closed linear subspace. This is going to be my Bergman space eventually, and a distinguished Schauder basis of this subspace. And again, I have a typo with the coordinate functionals. You look at the coordinate functionals because L prime, the dual of L is strictly convex, there exists unique Hahn-Banach extension. So these have equal norm with AJ, and they restrict to AJ on L. So they are functionals on A. So they are functionals on the whole of L, which extend A without increasing the norm. And now you do the obvious thing. So you take, so you want to project a point onto the subspace A. So what are you going to do? Okay, so you look at the series given by, so EJ is at the basis of the subspace A. If I had taken a point in the space A, then summation AJX EJ would converge to the point X. But if I take a point X in the bigger space L, I can't take AJ, I can take AJ tilde, the extended one, and look at its sum and hope that it converges to an element of A. Okay, so therefore this can be thought of as a way of emulating the notion of an orthogonal projection on a Banach space. Okay? So we call this, we couldn't find a good name for it, we are calling it just the basis projection. If somebody has a better suggestion, would like to hear that. Okay, so we are calling it the basis projection determined by the basis EJ of the subspace A. So some simple observations. Clearly, this is defined on A because if I take a point in A, then AJ tilde is A, and we get the Schauder series, which converges by basically definition of the Schauder basis. The image is A, so the problem of non-reproduction has been banished, and it reproduces. So number 3, it reproduces, and it's if you compose it with itself, you get back the operator. That's obvious. And this is what we want to do. This is the hope that if the domain of this is dense and it is bounded in the norm of L, I will be able to extend it to a bounded linear projection from from the whole of L onto E. So this is the, so provided I can carry out the program in part 5, I'll get a projection operator. So let us quickly look at a couple of examples to see that this is not something completely unfamiliar. The first one is the motivating example, orthogonal projections in Hilbert spaces. So again, just to recapitulate, we take L to be now a Hilbert space, A closed subspace. And then what are these coefficient functionals? These coefficient functionals are simply the inner product of X with EJ. So, when you expand in an orthogonal series, this is what you do, the formula for the Fourier coefficients, okay? And what is its Hahn-Banach extension? It is again given by the same formula, because by the Riesz representation theorem, the norm of this guy is basically the norm of EJ, and this is that by the strict convexity, this is the unique extension. Okay? And therefore, this is the orthogonal projection, and again by very classical convexity reasons, this thing is bounded on all of L and gives rise to a projection onto E. So therefore, in this case, if we get exactly what we want, I mean, it would be bad if we didn't. Let us now look at another example, which is the Zigo projection on the unit disk. Okay, here your enveloping space, the bigger space L, is going to be the LP of the circle, okay, and the smaller space on which you are projecting is going to be the Hardy space of the unit disk. So of course, let P not be 2, otherwise there's not much to say here. Okay, so you look at the Hardy space, and of course the Hardy space can be identified with a subspace of LPT by looking at the boundary value. So instead of the Taylor series, you look at the Fourier series with the same coefficients. Okay, so the fact that the LP Fourier series converges in norm in LP, is basically saying that the e to the power I thetas, they form a Schauder basis of the Hardy space. Okay? They also form a Schauder basis if you let J go. I think I should say here J goes from 0 to infinity, because you also want constants in your Hardy space. So just correct myself, J equal to 0. Okay. So the basis projection, you can easily verify, is exactly nothing other than the basis, the Zigo projection. The Zigo projection is the basis projection, okay? And the basis projection in this case is bounded, and it gives rise to a projection onto the subspace that we're interested in. Now, here there is an important difference between the Bergman projection and the Zigo projection. The Bergman projection is not the basis projection. The LP Bergman projection, in the sense that the projection obtained by starting with the Bergman kernel and using it to define a projection operator is not the basis projection. Okay, so this is so we'll have to look at the basis projection that corresponds to the Bergman spaces. Okay, there is one minor inconvenience that arises in our application, and that is the following. Our Schauder basis will be the monomials, the LoRa monomials in Reinhardt spaces. Okay, here they are not linearly ordered. You can linearly order them, but they're ordered by, so they're indexed by Zn naturally, and they are ordered by in order to make them converge, you need to group them in boxes or squares or something like that. So we need a slightly more general notion of Schauder basis, in which you allow the set of indices to be arbitrary, basically. In our case, it will only be Zn. Okay, so therefore, this is just the definition. By Schauder basis, I mean the basis elements along with a certain kind of partial ordering, like certain finite subsets, increasing collection of finite subsets, in order to represent an element of the Banach space. What you want is you want to take partial sums over these distinguished subsets and let the subsets blow up to infinity. So it's basically the same thing, but I need this for technical reasons. Now, let us go to Bergman spaces and see what this means there. So we take a Reinhardt domain and a radial weight function. This is because, again, we are dealing with this kind of torus actions and stuff. So these are the things that are invariant. So you take a continuous radial weight function, and we, which means that they are on the Reinhardt shadow, they are given as mod Z1 through mod functions of mod Z1 through mod Zn. Okay. These are the holomorphic monomials, or the LoRa monomials corresponding to a multi-index in Zn. And this notation has already been introduced by Luke, that these are the integrable, the monomials, pth power integrable monomials. Okay? So now the fact is that if I'll first state it using the high power terminology, and then I'll try to explain what this really means. Okay, so if you look at the collection of those monomials which are pth power integrable, like here, along with this collection of increasing multi-indices. Okay, so how are these multi-indices formed? These multi-indices are pth power integrable, and every coordinate, every one of the indices in absolute value is less than or equal to n. For example, in two variables, you are taking a square and intersecting it with the so in the square in the space of lattice points, you saw many of those pictures in Luke's talk, and intersecting them with the monomials which are pth power integrable. These form a Schauder basis of the Banach space AP omega lambda. Okay, so in the case when lambda is identically 1, this was proved in a paper by Jeff, Luke, and myself, and the same ideas can be modified slightly to give a proof in a general case. So, okay, what is this? What does this mean? This basically means the following: you take a function which lies in this space AP omega and expand it in a LoRa series. Okay? And then you form the square partial sum, which means you form the partial sum of the LoRa series over all those multi-indices where each coordinate is less than or equal to n. Okay? So you get a sequence of functions indexed by these non-negative integers n. And these functions converge to the given function f in the LP norm with the weight lambda. Okay? So this is analogous to a very well-known statement about Hardy spaces, that the Taylor series of a function in the Hardy space of the disk actually converges in the Hardy norm and so on. Okay, this has some history. Like, it was first proved by Zhu and the disk, and then it also is there in the book by Duren and Schuster. And in general, this reduces to an estimate on a repeated Hilbert transform. What can expect. And the thing is, this choice of this square partial sums is not really essential. What you really need is LP convergence of multiple Fourier series. Okay, so this reduces to some problem about Fourier multipliers, and there are other solutions, other ways of summing, but this will be sufficient for our purpose, because as we will see that the kernel we will get, it converges in a much nicer way, so we don't need to worry about this particular way of summing. Now we come to the kernel, and this formula has already been explained by Luke. Okay, so I'll come back to this formula where it comes from. Okay, so the thing is, this is the basis kernel on Bergman spaces of Reinhardt domains with these radial waves. Okay, so this is how it looks like. So okay, and we state it like formally as a theorem. So this omega is bounded and pseudo-convex. Okay, and okay, and in Reinhardt, of course, everything here is Reinhardt, which I did not mention, but you know it is the case. Okay, and the first thing is that this series. Okay, so this E alpha Z is Z to the power alpha. E alpha W bar is W bar to the power alpha. That means W1 bar to the power alpha 1 dot 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 and so on. Okay, and this here is like you take mod Wj to the power p minus 2 times alpha j and take a product of this. So this series converges uniformly on compact subset of omega cross omega. And if I take a function which is continuous and compactly supported in the domain omega, then this actually represents the monomial basis projection with respect to the Schauder basis constructed just in the previous slide. Okay, so therefore this is our possible substitute for the Bergman kernel in the situation of these Reinhardt domains with weight LP. And why is this the case? So there's many years ago I read an article by Paul Halmos on how to give a math talk, and he says you should prove something. Okay, so so following that wise advice, I'm not proving, but I'll try to indicate at least here how it goes. So so first of all, these Schauder expansions are identical to LoRa expansions. So therefore, what you really need to show is that if you look at this LoRa expansion, you look at this coefficient functional, which is basically the same as the coefficient functional for the Schauder basis. Okay, then you want to compute its Hahn-Banach extension, which is unique. Okay, so we guess somehow that the Hahn-Banach extension is what? It is a mapping, bounded mapping from LP omega lambda into C. So therefore, there exists a function G alpha, which will be in LQ, which represents it, because here we are now in real analysis. We are not, just ordinary LP spaces. Okay, so therefore, there exists a function in GQ, LQ, excuse me, called G alpha, such that this linear functional can be represented by integration against the conjugate of this function. And you can guess that this is one such function. This is one function which represents it. So just all you need to do is to check that when you have a holomorphic function, integration against this, if f is holomorphic, then this actually gives you the alpha LoRa coefficient. This is one thing you have to check. Also, you have to check that the norm of this functional a alpha tilde is exactly equal to the norm of the coefficient functional a alpha, which you can explicitly compute, which is 1 over the norm of the basis function. And this one, in this case, is very easy to compute the norm of the extended functional, because by basic theory of LP spaces, it is nothing but the LQ norm of G alpha, which you can just compute by integration. So therefore, this sort of allows you to get a handle on this abstract thing. So everything is completely concrete here, and you get basically this this thing. Okay, and then one verifies that if you sum this series up, you get the claimed kernel K P lambda. All right. Now the question is one of convergence. Why does this converge? Okay, when p equal to 2, let's go back to this thing. Suppose p equal to 2, then this guy disappears, because p equal to 2 means that this becomes 0. Okay, we are back to the ordinary Bergman kernel, and that there is some convexity argument that you can use in order to basically see that this thing converges, right? So you take the L2 norm on a compact, and that is bounded by the sup norm on a compact is bounded by the L2 norm of the whole thing, and so on. I don't have that handle here. But fortunately, it is not a problem. It still converges. Okay. So one way of seeing that is is to replace this Zj wj mod to the power p minus 2 times wj bar by tj, and then the kernel takes this form, which is just a power series in the new variable t. Okay, and then observe that this series seems to be made especially for the root test to work, and also note that the point evaluations in the LP space are continuous, and using these two and using the root test or a comparison, you show directly that this series converges. It converges not on omega itself, but it converges on this new domain omega to the power p, which is basically, you can think of it as the pth power of the original domain, and it is indeed suppose p is an integer, positive integer, then what it means is that the image of the proper holomorphic map obtained by raising every coefficient, every coordinate to the pth power. Okay? And then you have to show that you can go back to the original variables z and w, and still, so you have to show that if you look at the z and w coordinates, then the map that sends zw to t actually is surjective onto omega p, okay? Because your original series was in the variables zw, and you have replaced it by this new coordinates t. So if you pass now to the log absolute coordinates, what you are asking is that the mapping from log omega, the log convex, the log shadow, and log omega cross log omega to Rn given by this formula goes into p log omega, which is exactly the log shadow of the pth power of the domain omega. Okay? And this, however, is surjective because omega was assumed to be pseudo-convex, and therefore its log absolute image is convex, and therefore this is just saying that this thing is convex. So therefore, we have proved that this thing converges. We have therefore constructed this kernel as continuous and holomorphic in the variable z thing in every pseudo-convex Reinhardt domain. So that is what I can do. So I already remarked that K2 lambda is the usual weighted Bergman kernels. We haven't gotten anything new here. Other thing that Luke also remarked, and which is important, is that this is continuous in the parameter p. So of course, this is kind of an interpolation or extrapolation problem, right? So you start with this L2 space and you want to go to the LP spaces continuously, or even possibly analytically, which you cannot do. This is not an analytic function of p in general, okay? However, it is continuous, so at least you have saved something. So as you vary, and the hope is that the norms of these are also, this we have not checked, but the hope is that the norms are also continuous, which is not the case with the sub-Bergman projection, which blows up at certain points, okay? So, and Luke already showed how it looks like on the unit disk. It can also be computed explicitly on balls when p is an even integer. I had a slide in which I had written down the formula, but I deleted it. It's kind of ugly. But that is not important. The point is, this is something about as concrete as the good old Bergman kernel. In the sense, if you look at the Bergman kernel, that also basically can be computed only explicitly on the ball, and or something that comes from the ball as a quotient or product or something like that. Okay? So it's the same behavior here. So nothing new. Okay, now that we have introduced this new thing into the subject, now we have to see whether it makes sense or not. So we want to see that this thing gives me better behavior in situations where the old Bergman kernel does not give me good behavior. Okay, so the examples. So where do these examples come from? These examples are those of Reinhardt domains in which the boundary of the domain passes through the center of the symmetry. So all the examples of Reinhardt domains with non-regular Bergman kernel, they're formed in this class. So this class is very ancient. So it was, I don't know, as Hartogs must have considered it, and that's why the simplest example is called the Hartogs triangle. And this, the fact that these, so the fact that if you take a holomorphic function in a neighborhood of these, of the Hartogs triangle, and then it extends all the way to the BiDisk, this is already known in the 1930s. I think Behnke and Stein or something like that. Okay, and then it is also known that in this class, okay, suppose you have a domain whose boundary passes through 0. then, and you take on this domain, Reinhardt domain, of course, everything is Reinhardt here, and take on this a function which is smooth up to the boundary, then it actually extends to a larger domain independently of the function. And so this was also known to simulate. So this is the class in which you want to test. So this we are going to perform the laboratory experiments in this class. So and Gian-Maria talked about this just yesterday. So here, so you also need a situation in which you know the behavior of the ordinary Bergman projection. So these are the ones that we will use are the monomial polyhedra. So these are a generalization of the Hartogs triangle. So the Hartogs triangle is given by the equations mod Z1 is less than mod Z2 and mod Z2 is less than 1. So two equations in two complex dimensional space. Okay. Similarly, the monomial polyhedra are given by n equations in n dimensional space, but they are philosophically very similar. So you take, so for example, if you look at the first equation of a Hartogs triangle, mod Z1 less than mod Z2, you might as well write it as mod Z1 to the power mod Z2 to the power minus 1 is less than 1. I wish I could have written things down, but this is the best I can do under the circumstances. So what you do is you try to emulate this. You take the absolute values, raise them to powers and set them less than minus 1. And you do this for each coordinate. Okay. So these are the monomial polyhedra, which includes the Hartogs triangle, and it includes many other things which you see some pictures later. And the main thing about them is on this class we have success. Okay, so let U be a monomial polyhedron. Then for every p from 1 to infinity, the monomial basis projection is bounded and surjective from LPU to APU. So therefore, the first test succeeds. So what are these things? Okay, so Hartogs triangle, I have already explained what it is, and it corresponds to these indices. So this is not only the Hartogs triangle, this is the generalized, the rationally generalized Hartogs triangle, HM over N, which Jeff and Luke studied. Okay, it has properties in many ways very similar to the Hartogs triangle. And there are many other cases. Okay, so these pictures were made by our undergraduate student, then undergraduate student Chase. So this shows two monomial polyhedra. All of them is in absolute space. All of them observe the boundary passes to the center of symmetry. And the monomial polyhedra has the property that the monomial, it has the property that we need, that the Bergman projection, the usual Bergman projection is not nicely behaved. In fact, in this case, again, Gian-Maria mentioned this, one can find explicitly the endpoints. The endpoints are of the form 2 kappa u over kappa u minus 1 and 2 kappa u divided by kappa u plus 1, where this kappa u is a integer that you can compute from the indices B defining the Bj defining the monomial polyhedra. So this thing recaptures. So this kind of thing has been going on for some time. I think I have to thank Yunus, who is there, who introduced me to this subject. There was a conference many years ago in the American Institute of Mathematics in California. And at that time, my impression was everything about this problem had been solved by Fong and Stein. But at that time I learned about this, and after that various other people have studied many other examples. Okay, so this is sort of like a general class in which you can see what is happening. All right. Then how does one now show that on a monomial polyhedron, the new monomial basis projection is well behaved? Okay, this is very similar to what Gian-Maria was doing with these Rudin ball quotients yesterday, but we now do it in the simplest setting of these monomial polyhedra in which the mappings are monomial mappings. So what you can do is the following: you can uniformize the monomial polyhedron by domain, which is product domain, but the factors are very simple. They're either the disk or they're the punctured disk. Okay, and then there is a proper holomorphic map of a particular form, which is a monomial map. So every coordinate of every component of that map is a monomial in the source coordinates. Okay, so this then becomes a branched covering of the domain, the monomial polyhedron U, and it is equivalent after removing this branching and the ramification loci. It is equivalent to a covering map, which is a normal or a regular covering map, a Galois covering map, and the quotient group gamma also turns out to be very simple and in fact an abelian group. Okay. And the other thing is that there is this pullback operation, which is completely natural if you think of these as N0 forms, okay? And this tells me that in the L2 situation, the Bergman kernel and projection are natural, and the naturality, the transformation law is given by this formula. And then we can define what are known as the group invariant subspaces. So this is the group invariance in the sense of N0 form. So suppose we are given a family of functions, and you think of them on this domain, on this Reinhardt domain or some, and you think of them as being the coefficients of these N0 forms. And then you look at the subspace of those forms which are invariant under the action of this, under the natural action of this group of automorphisms by Pullman. Okay? So then we have the following. Okay, and this is analogous to, this is another version, we should say, of the Bell transformation formula, specialized to this case. In this case, we are looking at only at monomial polyhedra, but actually this is also going to work for monomial maps between Reinhardt domains. We don't need it, but it is going to work. Okay? So now we have a monomial polyhedron, and you have its uniformization by a product of disks and polydisks. So phi is the uniformization, and U is the original monomial polyhedron. And there is the deck transformation group gamma. So you can think of this map phi as almost, except for this small analytic set, almost a quotient map. And then we can show that the following two statements are equivalent. Okay, so first of all, the monomial basis projection is bounded, which is to say that the monomial basis projection was originally defined on continuously compactly supported functions. Now it satisfies this thing satisfies a priori estimates in the LP norm, and therefore I extend it to the LP's case. And this by a familiar argument is completely equivalent to saying that the weighted monomial basis projection on, so here what do I mean? I look at the weighted L2 space, LP space, AP omega with this weight, which arises when you look at this kind of things, okay? And then by one of the things we said, there is a Schauder basis, and you use that to form a monomial projection. So that restricts to a bounded operator mapping these two. All right. It can also be put in terms of this picture, this commutative diagram. So Luke has his lattice point diagrams, and I have my commutative diagrams. Okay. So this is so what this is saying is, okay, this map phi sharp in this case is particularly nice. It is almost a isometric isomorphism. It's an isometric isomorphism up to a factor determined by the number of sheets. Okay, so in general, this is the case. If you take, this is there in Bell's paper. So if you take the image of an L2 space under the pullback induced by a proper holomorphic map, it is a closed subspace of the range. Okay, however, it is difficult to characterize what that space is. In this case, when you have this Galois covering kind of situation, you have this very nice thing that it is exactly, the image of this phi sharp is exactly the gamma invariant things. And therefore, from this, you can read off this fact that P is bounded if and only if P is a bounded projection operator, if and only if P tilde is itself a bounded projection operator. And to complete the proof, we only note that in the case of a disk, or a punctured, in the case of a punctured disk, this was already discussed by Luke, that you can do this by the Schurz lemma. There's some small technical points here that come in. First of all, the Schurz lemma has to now to be done with two weights, and those weights have to be chosen wisely. That's not completely obvious how to do it. There's also another problem that comes because of the branching, that if you look at this determinant of 5 time, it might vanish at certain points. Okay? But that it turns out to be not a serious problem. You can easily overcome those. Okay, and then at the end of the day, we have a situation where this omega is a product of these disks and polydisks. In every factor, you have this kind of bounded projection operator. By a very simple application of Fubini's theorem n number of times, you see that we have on the right hand side exactly what we want, that this projection is bounded, and therefore by the commutativity of this diagram, this is bounded. So these symbols over here mean that these are actually isomorphisms of Banach spaces up to a scaling constant. Okay, at the end of the day, I would like to make some comments about the sub-Bergman kernel. Okay, so again typo over here. Okay, so for p greater than or equal to 2, you define this. So how is that? Let us recall how the subbargman kernel and the projection is defined. So you start with the closure of AP omega in. Okay, again, there's a mistake over here. I must have been very careless yesterday evening. So this is the closure of AP omega in A2 omega. So in general, the AP omega for p greater than or equal to 2, for example, in the Hartogs triangle for p greater than 4 is not dense in A2 omega. Okay, in the case of smoothly bounded pseudo-convex domains, you know that smoothly bounded functions, smooth holomorphic functions smooth up to the boundary are dense in all these LP space or AP spaces. This is not the case in general. Okay, so then you look at the closure of AP omega in A2 omega. We call this GP omega, and you can look at the orthogonal projection from L2 omega to this subspace, and then try to extend this using the usual kernel method to the whole of the LP space. Okay, so the kernel is given by this. So the differences are clear. So for example, what happens here is the thing in the denominator is the L2 norm, and this is going to blow up as you reach this threshold. So therefore, this thing is not continuous. This thing is not a continuous function of P, unlike the new projection that we are studying. And however, the good news is that even in this setting, you have that for a monomial polyhedron in CN, the LP subbargman projection is bounded from LPU to AP. Okay? So therefore, this is in some sense a worse projection. So therefore, if this is bounded, then we expect the better behaved monomial basis projection to be bounded, which turns out to be the case. It would be very interesting to find a domain, and at this point I have absolutely no idea how to do it. Very interesting to find a situation in which your subbargman projection blows up, but your the more laboriously constructed, more costlier monomial basis projection actually remains bounded. We have no idea how to do it. So this is okay, so I think the last two comments I want to make is that this makes sense only for p greater than or equal to 2, because you have to take this AP subspace inside A2, and this is I don't know what this. I didn't mean Hausdorff here. I think I don't know what this word Hausdorff is doing here. I don't know. Okay, this can be defined on all domains. Okay, and the norm is a discontinuous function and becomes unbounded at certain points. So this is a sort of like a weaker, cheaper, and easier to deal with projection that can also be used. So I think both are valuable. Another thing about the subbargman projection is that it can be defined on arbitrary domains. The way its representation as a series depends on the fact that the domain is Reinhardt. Okay. I think this Hausdorff must have meant Reinhardt, and I confused the two German names. Okay. So, okay. So then So therefore there are some interesting questions. So there are these interesting questions about these operators, and it would be nice to know the answers to some of them, but we don't know how. Okay. I think with this I will end this talk, and thank you.